In this video, I'm going to share with you why I think if you're looking to get a new car, why you should A, have a contract hire car, B, how it works, and C, from a tax point of view, it's really good for you as well, depending on your property structure. And I'll also share with you some of the cars that I've had through contract hire, so you can see what's possible. There's different ways you can get cars, but the one that I've been using now in my 16th year is contract hire, and I think it's absolutely fantastic, and that's why I thought I'd make a video and share with you why I think contract hire is a good way forward. So the first ever car that I got on contract hire was all the way back in 2005, which was a 7 Series BMW, and 16 years later right now, believe it or not, I've got a 7 Series BMW. Not the same one, of course, but in between I've had all different types of cars. And all of them bar one they've all been contract hire cars, and I think contract hire is a fantastic way of running cars, because I was taught many years ago that anything that depreciates, lease it. Why do you want to own it? And I only ever bought one car that I paid for myself by way of hire purchase. So I went into the showroom, bought the car, and funded it partly by deposit and partly by a hire purchase, and that was a BMW M3, and which was £52,000 back in 2004. Within a year it had depreciated, and I sold it for £38,000. So I lost £14,000 on the value of the car, plus all the interest payments and HP payments that I'd made on top, and that was a painful experience for me. And then in 2005, a year later, when I sold that car, because I got it in 2004, sold it in 2005, I've stuck with contract hire. How contract hire works is very simple. You decide which car you want, or look at a number of cars, and then decide how long you want it for. So let's say you want it for 2 years, you're going to have it on a X plus 23. 23 is the number of months that you have to pay installments for. X is usually the deposit that you pay, which is non-refundable, plus the first month's payment. So in my case, it's usually 3 plus 23. That means I make 3 monthly installments up front. So if the car is, let's say, for £500 a month, I've got to pay £1,500 up front, which is 3 times the 500. The first, from the 1,500, 500 is for the first month's payment. The other £1,000 goes towards the contract costs. Then I pay £500 every month plus VAT, and after 23 additional payments, I give the car back. You agree the mileage up front. So if it's 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, and of course the monthly premium is based on the mileage. And then at the end you hand the car back. If there's really small damage here, there, a few scuffs, usually they don't mind. They'll take the car, but if there's any kind of serious scratches or damage, you'll have to repair the vehicle. They do check the tires, so you'll have to make sure that the tires are legal, otherwise they won't take the car. And you've got to pay for the insurance. With repairs and maintenance, you've got 2 options. You can either have the package with it, which basically they work out how much it's going to cost to service the car based on the mileage that you've said, and they'll include that in the price, or you can pay for it yourself. And I usually just pay for it myself, but it works out to be the same either way. So that then helps them work out the premium. You pay for the car, at the end you give it back. Depreciation is not your problem, not your hassle. If you go over the stipulated mileage, they usually have a cost per mile, and it obviously varies depending on the car. But let's say if it was 10 pence per mile, so for every 1,000 miles that you go over your stipulated allowance, you would pay £1,000. So let's say you had 10,000 miles per year, you've got the car for 2 years, so you can drive 20,000 miles. And let's say you're paying 10 pence in excess mileage, and you go 10,000 miles over, so you've driven 30,000 miles as opposed to 20,000 miles. For the additional 10,000 miles, you're going to pay £1,000 extra for the extra mileage. It's not that bad. Do you see what I'm saying? Whereas when I bought my first car, which was the M3, first brand new car, the first one that I ever paid for. Before that, I was driving a family car, a family-owned car. The deposit I had to put down at the time, I think it's going back for obviously quite a few years now, was like something like £10,000. So if you haven't got a £10,000 deposit, then you can't get into that car. Well, using my example, if it's costing you £500 per month and you've got to pay 3 payments up front, then most people usually can afford £1,500. So you pay £1,500, you're in a brand new car. You can't get into a brand new car by paying £1,500 usually, which is exactly what I've done for my current 7 Series. If you want to pay a higher installment up front, so you can do like a 6 plus 23, 9 plus 23, which means you pay more up front. What that means is your monthly premium goes down. So if you did like a 6 plus 23, using my previous example, if it's £500 per month on a 3 plus 23, on a 6 plus 23, it might be 450 or 400, for example. On a nice 9 plus 23, it might be 375. So you pay less every month. Again, works out to be the same. I always think, why would you pay a higher deposit up front? Sometimes they do special deals where if you pay a higher amount, you do get a better deal. You don't see many of those usually. And then, like I said, it doesn't have to be 2 years. It could be 3 years. It could be 4 years. Sometimes even 5 years. I always stick to 2 years. Then you're running the car through your company or your business. If you have if you're a sole trader or a partnership or an LLP, you run the car through that and claim all the costs, and then work out how much the car you've used privately. So let's say you've driven 10,000 miles, because that's your stipulated mileage, and you use 20% of the car, so 2,000 miles per year for personal use, which means 20%. You work out all the costs for that car or vehicle, and you basically reduce the cost by 20%. So everything that goes through your accounts, when your accountant prepares your tax return, they just say they add back 20% of the vehicle costs, so you only claim 80% of the costs for tax purposes. That works well. If you're VAT registered, you can claim back half the VAT on the contract hire vehicle if you're going to have private use on it. Of course, if there's no private use whatsoever, then you can claim back all the VAT, but using my earlier example, the 20%, depending on, most people do have some private use, so you just claim back half the VAT and leave the rest as it is. If it's through a company, i.e. a limited company, then you've got benefiting in kind tax, and that now depends on the price of the vehicle, the CO2 emissions, which works out to be quite expensive. So then you want to do the calculation, which is, am I better off having a car through my limited company if that's the structure that you're using, or should I get the car personally? And then if you're driving 10,000 miles, and let's say all 10,000 miles are for business purposes. If I'm doing 10,000 miles for business purposes a year, you claim 45 pence per mile in a tax year for the first 10,000 miles. So every tax year, you're going to claim back £4,500 from your company. If £4,500 a year can help you afford the car, so if you've got a car which is say £350 a month, okay, that gets you to 4,200 per year for the car. You got £300 for the insurance, which probably isn't going to be enough. So you might say you want to spend your budget is £300, so you get a contract hire car personally for £300 a month. Let's say that includes VAT, and then that costs you £3,600 a year. You've got £900 left over to pay for your insurance and for your fuel, and there isn't going to be any repairs and maintenance on a new car. There's no MOT. There'll be some wear and tear and service costs, but again, minimal. So you do that calculation, and you might say, well, I'm better off not putting the car through the limited company and having a benefit in kind tax. I'll keep it personally. Or if you're a sole trader, partnership, or an LLP, you might decide to run it through your company. So those are the things you want to think about. Then think about the depreciation and see if that is worthwhile buying that car personally, or buying it or getting it through contract hire. The higher the depreciation, the better that you do contract hire. But remember, the higher the depreciation, more likely that the contract hire costs might be higher as well, because they take that into account. But generally speaking, like I've said to you, I've been doing this for 16 years. Every time I've seen a car the contract hire deals have been much better than buying the car personally. You got to find the deposit, you got to make HP payments. If you pay for the car cash, let's say you buy a 70 grand car, you pay for it cash, you've tied up 70 grand, you could get a property for 70 grand and do a flip. You do the flip, let's say you make 15 grand on a flip a year, which is not hard to do, by the way, pretty easy to do. Some people say it's not even worth doing a flip if you're going to make 15 grand. You want to try and make 30 grand plus, but let's keep the numbers easy. You do a flip, a small flip, using that £70,000, make 15 grand. That's going to fund, if you've got a car that costs you £1,000 a month on contract hire, which, I mean, that's going to be a serious car. But remember, my BMW is only £500 a month. Yes, that cost you 12 grand, you've done a flip for 15 grand, you've still got 3 grand left over. So why would you want to put money into a car, buy it cash, then pay for all the repairs, maintenance, wear and tear, and then lose on the depreciation? It makes no sense whatsoever. So those are some of the reasons why I think a contract hire car works so much better than owning the car. I think any asset that's going to depreciate, always think about leasing it, don't own it, because it loses money. And why do you want to buy assets that lose money? You want to be investing your money into property which appreciates in capital value and creates monthly cash flow. That's the aim of the game here. And some of the cars that I've owned on contract hire, the first car I ever bought was a BMW M3, which I paid for, and I lost, like I said, 14 grand on depreciation. Then I had a BMW 7 Series, because I've always liked cars. When I was growing up, I grew up in a pretty deprived area in Peterborough. One thing I really liked was cars, looking at cars and all the fancy stuff, especially I loved Porsches. There weren't that many around in the area that I grew up, but every now and then on one of the main high streets you might see somebody driving in a Porsche. I used to love that big whale tail. And from the 7 Series I then went on to a Porsche 911 Turbo. That was a dream car for me. From there I moved on to a 6 Series, then an M6, then I've had a Range Rover SVR, a Porsche Panamera, a Rolls-Royce Ghost, and 2 or 3 others probably in between. So I've kind of done the whole kind of track in terms of the cars that I really wanted. And people usually ask me, which one was your most favorite car? Without doubt, 911 Turbo. So if I wanted to have one car, which I pretty much can, by the way, before I wanted to have one car all the time, it would be a Porsche 911 Turbo. I think it's fantastic. If you were to ask my wife that question in terms of what one family car would you want, she would say the Range Rover SVR, and my kids would probably say the same thing again. So I've been lucky enough to drive quite a few, own, when I say own I mean contract hire, have ownership of or control of quite a few different cars, and property to some extent has enabled me to do that, and it's been really good fun. I'm at the age now where cars don't excite me that much, so I do like cars, but not as much as I used to, say 10 odd years ago. Or maybe that's just because I'm getting older, maybe that's because I've just had some nice cars and you maybe get bored with them. But as I've said to you, apart from the 911 Turbo, every single car has been on contract hire, so you can get really nice cars on contract hire, and they are well worth it. Even the Rolls-Royce Ghost, which I liked a lot, it wasn't very practical in terms of driving, because everybody looks at you getting car park, and if you're into that kind of attracting that type of attention, good. I don't really like it. I'd like to think I'm a quiet guy, just want to get on with my work and my business, as opposed to kind of trying to show off. And I'm not sharing the cars with you to show off. I'm just sharing this with you to say the kind of cars that are possible for you to have. You can have some nice cars on contract hire. Think about it seriously. Some good websites. The one I use, I think it's contract hire and leasing.co.uk. I mean, if you just type in contract hire on Google, the first 2 or 3 that come up, just go and have a look on those. You'll get some really good deals. And once you go into contract hire, I'm pretty confident you're not going to go and get a car through any other means, especially if you like new cars. If you want a second-hand car, an old car, where you want to spend 3 or 5 grand and own it, then obviously contract hire isn't going to work for you, because obviously if you're paying £300, £400, £500 a month, it's going to cost you 5 or 6 grand a year, and you only want to spend £300 and you want to own the car and run it for 3 years, then it doesn't work. But if you like nice cars, and especially if you like new cars like I do, then contract hire is the way forward.